The first thing actually I should do is go over what we would like to cover. Bert sent me a few emails. We haven't spoken a lot actually, but just of sort of some goals for this discussion today. So I want to affirm that these are correct, which was to introduce IFTDSS to you guys and demonstrate why you might want to use IFTDSS over traditional modeling programs or whatever you've been using in the absence of IFTDSS. And then some very specific goals about some fire behavior modeling work for out-year planning, for zone planners with budgeting work, the types of graphical models we can produce to display fuels and vegetation changes across the landscape. I'm assuming both for NEPA analysis as well as for prescribed fire burn implementation plan development, and just whatever other kind of information or products that resource specialists could use. So does that still seem like a good set of goals and objectives for you guys?
Yeah, I think it's pretty good.
Okay, and this can be really informal. There's a small group. I would like to know, I know, Bert, I've seen you in there. We have secret powers where we can see the users and what they're up to, and I know you've played around. Has anyone else in the room been exposed to IFTDSS at all, or either watching you or creating an account and poking around in there?
I got an account. This is Tomasi. I got an account. I've seen a presentation at the California Fields Committee about a year ago or so, and I haven't done much delving around inside there. It looks powerful, but I don't have much experience in working with it.
Could somebody closer to the phone summarize that? I'm having trouble making out that voice.
So Tomas said he at the California Fields Committee, he saw a demonstration of it. And
okay.
And that's it. He has an account. Yeah, Tomas has an account. But other than that, nobody else has been introduced to it yet.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's great, and that's fine. So we have 2 hours. Usually I go through sort of an overview of the application and what it can do, and we do that in an hour, and then we can dive into some of the specifics. Or I was thinking actually with this project it might be fun to just show you some of the products first and then work backwards or answer questions as to what goes into those products and how we get there. So I might try something a little bit different just to see if that's better, so I don't drone on for a long time, and you sort of get some of the good stuff right away. So I think I'll try that, and Nicole, I'm not monitoring chat or anything, so help me, just interrupt me if I start to go off on a tangent. But
I'll do that.
Yeah, feel free. My feelings cannot be hurt. So the first thing I want to do is just to create an account, you go to iftds.firenet.gov. You hit login. You can see we have a very sort of robust landing page with information about current training, webinars available. I shouldn't say training. We're doing a series of webinars on Fridays. There's a lot of tutorials, YouTube videos, help. Josh is the mastermind of all that stuff. So there's a pretty thorough system that you may want to explore further. And then if you don't have an existing account, you just hit register and log in. And once you get in there, we've designed the application with the fuels positions in mind. So, and that means trying to sort of present a representation of the types of work that you do in the course of duties as a fuels person. And that's how we came to have this sort of fuels planning cycle, where you start with a higher level evaluation of your landscape, dive a little deeper into strategic planning, implementation planning, monitoring and reporting, all being centered around maps and data. This is the vision of IFTDSS. Long term, we haven't built full functionality in each of these areas yet. Primarily right now, we just have stuff in landscape evaluation and strategic planning and the map so yet to be built are the implementation, planning, monitoring, and reporting. But that's the idea. And I think right off the bat, just to explain maybe what's different about IFTDSS from other tools you've used is that it's modern, so it's very fast. It's online, it's web-based, so you don't need to download the most current software, like you might need to update FlamMap or your version of ARC or whatever. And that speed allows you to sort of mess around more with what it is you're trying to figure out than focusing on just getting a product. You don't have to be a GIS person to use it. In fact, real GIS people tend to get a little bit frustrated because it's its own sort of simplified GIS that probably makes more sense to a non-GIS person than a GIS person. But it is compatible back and forth, to interact with files and things between the GIS and this application. It's oriented to build things that you can download as products and put into other reports. So I just thought I'd give sort of those ticklers. And then the cycle that I described, if once you click on across the top here, you have what's called a navigation bar. So there's four main things. Cycle, which makes this cycle interactive, so you can hover over or click on each section and see what's available to you. So like I mentioned, we have built things out a fair bit under landscape evaluation. Similarly, there's a little bit under strategic planning, but implementation planning is all to be developed. Monitoring is to be developed, and reporting is yet to be developed. So the other things up here, just to show you what they are, is the workspace, which is basically like your file manager in Windows Explorer. It's where you manage your files. You have a series of folders and filters you can apply, and you can organize your work, create your own folders, delete folders. So that's what that is. And similar to Windows Explorer, it's somewhat interactive. So if you click on something, you can view it on the map, you can download it, you can request a report on it. It's all very interactive. I just realized I actually logged into the wrong account, so I'll change that when I get going. The Map Studio is going to take you to a map environment. The Playground takes you, I'm going to go ahead and click it, to a place where you run the actual fire behavior models. Right now there's only one model in here. It's FlamMap Basic, so it's in the suite of the FlamMap models, and it models what we call landscape fire behavior, which is fire behavior at the pixel level. Each pixel is modeled independently. It's not a spread model like a Farsight or a near term. So it represents fire behavior across your landscape, and we'll look at some of those. And you see on my screen FTEM, for those of you familiar with fuel treatment effectiveness monitoring. That is going to be the next thing we release, hopefully in June sometime. And I just have that there because I'm in one of the developers, so it shows up on my screen. So let me log out and log into the correct account. I think that'll help. So any comments so far while I change accounts?
So what other models are you, besides FlamMap, are going to go in here? I mean, are you guys thinking about, I guess, using?
Yeah, Nicole, you want to handle that one?
Sure. For fire behavior modeling, kind of the next steps are to bring in other parts of FlamMap. So the burn probability part, so the minimum travel time with random ignitions, and that will be for quantitative risk assessment. And we're hoping to have the model in this fall, and then the full risk assessment by winter. And then we're also going to bring in the minimum travel time for set ignitions or short term if people use WFDSS. So that should also be in and running, I think, around fall. So we're trying to get both of those running at the same time. And then down the road, we've talked a lot about bringing in other models for smoke as well as fire effects, but they're not on the short kind of this calendar year planning horizon at this point.
Okay.
Yeah, good question. So thanks, I've logged back into the correct account where I've done a little bit of work fooling around with some data hopefully relevant to you guys, and Bert sent me a few shapefiles. So the first thing I want to show is just that interactiveness I talked about. I haven't actually gone directly to the Map Studio yet. As I said, you can move across the top, the navigation bar between these portions of the application. And you should stress that this is not a linear application where there's any set order that you necessarily do things in. You're free to just click around the application and do a variety of things from anywhere in the app. So users shouldn't feel like they could break it or they're going in the wrong order or anything. So just randomly from the playground, since I showed that to you, I'm going to show you, I've created a landscape for hopefully what is the Sierra, if I got it right. And if you click View on Map, just to show you this functionality, it will automatically open the Map Studio, and then it'll zoom to the extent of the file that you've selected. So in this case, it has zoomed to a landscape that I created for, hopefully I'm in the right place, the Sierra. I drew a boundary around it based on a boundary I could find. So this is based on Landfire 2014 data. So this Map Studio environment, you can get automatically zoomed by selecting a file to the extent of it, and it opens up. But this is an ArcGIS online-like environment where you can turn on and off a variety of different layers. You can open up the layer list that you've got on. So for example, just with my landscape file, I could turn off field model and just turn on, say, elevation if I wanted to just look at elevation or canopy cover or something like that. And you can zoom in and out. Just a few other things, these what are called widgets down at the bottom. There's an Add Layers tool, where if you select that, there's a wide variety of reference data available to you. So on the left tab here is a set of national reference layers. These are similar to what's in WFDS if some of you folks use WFDS, but they're worth poking around, and these are all sort of been through the Data Standards Committee for vetting for quality of data. So you've got boundaries, there is some T&E species information, there's disturbance history, a whole variety of things. And in addition to these reference layers, there's a section called My Layer. So this is where you can upload your own data if you have it in order to work with those shapefiles. So for example, Bert sent me a few different files, and I've uploaded the Sunny Meadows area, and then I did some manipulation of those to break them into different treatment types just for fun. I created a couple of my own files that you can do through it's called the Create Edit Shape tool down here, where if you open that up, so you can either hand draw one, or you can take one of these existing reference layers and just grab it and turn it into a shape file. So that's what I did to get this Sierra National Forest boundary. Nicole found for me this Caspo Pax layer, so I brought that in just for fun. So you can turn all these on and add them to your layer list if you want to. And then they're available to you over here, so you can use them. So in addition to like the landscape file coming in right away and you being able to play with it, similarly the outputs for any modeling runs can become available to you right away. So for example, if I go back into my folders, I can show you that I'll go to the whole forest. We have something called an auto 97th run, which is it takes your landscape, it finds the center point of the landscape you've drawn, it reaches out to find the nearest RAW station that's been through a QA, QC type process, and it does a fire behavior run based on the 97th percentile conditions for that station. And it does this automatically, and then you can view the outputs on the report, and again, it'll zoom into it. It'll turn that layer on. So this is what I mean by it's a pretty quick program. So you can turn this layer on, zoom into your area of interest, say up here in the Bass Lake area. Turn this off for now. Oops, maybe I should turn that back on so I know where I am. Just excuse this little oval. I drew that just for fun, but you can see a pretty quick and dirty representation of the distribution of the fire behavior under these conditions across the landscape. You know, the red being greater than 25-foot flame lengths, the yellow 4 to 8, and the green 0 to 1, and we've got it for the whole landscape to put it into context. I think I ran it for a 3.5 million acre landscape. I did this morning, and it literally took about 10, 15 minutes or something. 3.5 acres is the largest that you can do right now, so you get a very quick assessment. And if you're wondering what the inputs to the Auto 97s are and what station they used for that, if you go back to your workspace, you can get a report of that. And I'm showing you different ways you can do it. You don't necessarily have to do it the way I'm doing it. Oops. But it's in the Sierra National Forests folder, and there's a report. So this is the Sierra National Forest Auto 97 summary. If I say view summary, it'll bring up that information for me. So it's using a station named Shaver, which I hope is a decent representation. And then it tells you here in this header for this, what was the 97th percentile for the Shaver station. So 1 hour fuel moisture 3, 10 hour of 4, 100 hour 8, 128, and 163. So just a quick and dirty. And then this report on the left has all the things contained within it. So it's got a summary of your landscape information, and this is interactive, so you can click to go to the section you want, like this is fire behavior fuel model. If you wanted to look at what it's got for canopy cover, again, this is coming from Landfire, you would just go to the canopy cover section. And in addition to a map for each one, it's also got a bar chart of that distribution, a pie chart, a table, and then each one of these components can be downloaded to PDF or to an Excel file, or from the top, you can just click this arrow and it'll download the entire report, so with all these components as a PDF. So if anyone's used WFDS, it's similar to the landscape critique within WFDS, but it's a lot more modernized and thorough. It's just an upgraded version of that. So it's kind of interesting just to get a quick assessment of, say, crown fire potential, and it'll give you a distribution across this particular landscape of these various things. So you can also do that for an area of interest, or mask to a specific smaller shapefile. In this case, the entire landscape is the starting point, and then I masked it to the Sierra National Forest boundary right here. So that's a sort of quick example of one of the products that you could do. If I wanted to do this, say, just for the a resource of interest, because I was interested in what the specific flame lengths were in a certain habitat, you can do that too. And if, let's say, you look at that 97th percentile condition and you determine either that that's not what you want to represent, that's not accurate for the 97th percentile, whatever it might be, that's when you would go back and just go to this playground environment and do your own model run. So you're not by any means locked into that Auto 97. It's just a quick and dirty to let you take a look at the type of outputs you're going to get, and then you can begin to calibrate from that. And to do that, you just come back to the playground, select the model of which there's currently only one. Say you want to run it, and then for the fire folks in here, it should be a familiar set of inputs. You select a landscape. If you don't already have one, you can create one from right here. So you can either create it here in a thumbnail capacity, or if you say create in Map Studio, this will zoom you back to that Map Studio to draw a box on that landscape. Then you input your winds, speed and direction, crown fire method, foliar moisture, your initial moistures for your fine fuel. So this is where you might want to deviate from that auto 97, and then you say save and run, and you can begin to develop your own. When you do a run, back to the workspace, you can filter on model output. So I have the Sierra National Forest Auto 97 right there. It's represented by a flame. If I show all my files, I've got trees to represent the landscape I created, flames to represent the fire behavior, and these little bar charty things to represent any of the charts that I've created. So those are sort of the quick fundamental products that you can get to look at various things. So I have more to show you, but that was sort of a different way of just showing you quickly some of the products. Do you have any questions or comments so far? I can go into more depth on some of these.
So I understood how you can change it from that just 97 percentile. Let's say you wanted to go 50th percentile. Can you just plug in the number? Because I kind of went over that quick, and it looked like you can change solar moisture, the conditions, but can you just set the number in the program applying those conditions for, say, 50% percentile?
No, that's a great question. And Nicole, jump in if I don't give enough of an answer. But we would have liked to do that or do that eventually, but right now the only one that's automated is that 97th percentile. So anything else that you do, you would go into the playground here and manually populate those input values. You'd have to calculate those percentiles externally. When we looked at trying to derive some of those lower percentile classes, doing some analysis on weather station data, it got pretty messy pretty quickly, especially when we're doing it by pyrome or fairly large areas. So we sort of decided that for now it's better to just let users manually do that. And right now you have a record of all the runs you've created in here. This is everything I've done, and if I go look at it, like here's some I could show you. I played around with some prescriptions. If you hover over it, you can see some of the inputs in what's called the right-hand panel over here on the right. Whoops, if I'm not hovering, they don't show up. So what the wind speed, crown fire method, and moisture were. Although we don't currently have a copy function, so you do have to manually go in and change all the inputs on them. And then once you've run them, you'll have your series of outputs to look at and compare on the map. But hopefully that answers that question. Or Nicole, if you want to add anything additional.
I think you covered it all.
Okay.
Hey, Carolyn, can you select instead of the way that automatically selects a rod station, is there a way to, if you have a certain rod station that better represents for that 97th percentile, put that in there?
No, we get that question a lot. Currently you can't. In fact, I noticed when I was fooling around here, like sometimes I would go to the Wawona station and sometimes I'm getting whatever that other one was, and it's strictly based on the center point of whatever landscape it is you drew, and then what's considered a quality enough station to be in there is, honestly, it's the same criteria they used to allow stations into WFDS about 10 years ago, and then we're just using that same set of stations. So they haven't gone through any more analysis since then. We do have the intention to switch to gridded weather as it becomes available, which is seemingly in the pretty near future. So we've sort of limited investment time on more functionality in terms of grabbing specific stations, because soon, hopefully, it's going to be gridded weather inputs anyway, which will be much more localized to your landscape. So it didn't seem like a good interim step to implement.
Okay.
Let's see. So just going back to your objectives, let me think.
So Carolyn,
one of the things, yeah, go ahead.
Carolyn, another question that came up is with the multiple weather stations that are in there, so, you know, its selection criteria for using that certain station is just a geographic center point. It's the closest to that geographic center points.
Yeah,
Okay.
I believe so.
It's the closest with a long enough data range. So if it's a really short news station or a temporary rod station, it won't consider those. So I think it needs at least 10 years of data. So those are some of the criteria.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think because we're kind of getting into the weeds, but that's fine because the input data is important. The since we're pulling it from WFDS, I think the data may not be all the way to the present time with those stations, so it may be a snapshot from, say, 2005 to 2016 or something. I'm not sure that it's pulled the last couple more recent years, which could be significant. I know that's why you kind of need to look at that 97th percentile condition and make sure that it makes sense for your area.
And it's, since we're talking about this, it's also not just a straight 97th percentile. We do some math in the background based on ERC and figure out when the peak fire month is, and then buffer that on either end by another month. So you have a 3-month kind of fire season within the calculations, and then it figures out the average wind speed for that period for the 97th percentile and applies like a wind adjustment factor to make it a gust. And so it's not just, you can't necessarily recreate it in Fire Family Plus if you grab that weather station and the dates they have. There's a little bit more to it, and there's a lot of details in the help about that.
Okay.
So since we're talking about weather and running the models, I was just going to show you, I've got a shapefile here of the different potential units in this Sunny Meadows project area. And in thinking about burn implementation, I ran what I considered to be a hot end and a cool end for prescribed fire implementation there. So to show you how you could look at that here, if I just double clicked on the hot end prescription outputs and said view on map, and then I added my shapefile of the proposed units. And let's see, I want to add another fire behavior output, so I can go to this flamey icon, and it lists for me all the different analyses with fire behavior outputs that I've got that intersect with this map extent right here. So I see I want to put this cool end on one too. So now I've got, when I turn on my layer list, I've got the hot end and the cool end of the prescription. And then you can do a couple of different things. You could use the swipe tool to sort of compare the hot and the cool end of the prescription. If I zoomed into, say, some of these, oops, too much. Oh, I'm in the park, right? Here's some of these proposed treatment units, right? Let me turn. These polygons here represent, I don't know if these are familiar to all you guys, but this polygon was, I think, Sunny Meadows North or something like that. So if I choose which one I want to swipe on, then I can compare, turn off a couple of these. Oops, I selected the wrong one. The different fire behavior outputs by swiping across them. And I think in this case, I actually did the fire behavior on top of a landscape that had already been treated, which is why they might be a little bit less exciting. The other thing you can do that might be more useful is the identify tool, and then drill down, and you'll get in this box of pop-up, it'll show you prescription hot end, rate of spread 1.6 chains per hour, prescription cool end 1.2 chains per hour rate of spread. So you can sort of start to compare that way. I don't think I chose a great example, but you get the idea that you can display different outputs on a map and then use the swipe tool or the identify tool to kind of drill down and look at the comparisons between the two of them. And you can do that within an area of interest like a proposed unit, or if I turned on that resource area polygon, if you were interested in that, that's something else you could do. Let's see. I was going to start to show you guys the ways to look at the different treatment analysis and effects and how to compare them in here, but I don't want to jump the gun if there's some other sort of broad scale functionality that you might have questions about before we dive into comparing different treatment analyses. So you guys have any thoughts or questions on what I've showed you so far, or am I going too fast? I could give more of an overview if you would like it, because I am kind of diving right into the outputs.
Hey, I got kind of a question just on where IFTDSS is going, and it's still being developed, but I was just looking at some of that reporting. What comes to mind is, we're already using present systems, whether it be fax or here in California, we have something called PFERS, and then there's WFDS that, we do kind of analysis and reporting at least of our decision processes. But is IFTDSS eventually going to replace some of these systems, or are they going to marry up, or is WFDS going to eventually become IFTDSS?
Wow, you guys cut right to the chase with your questions.
On the roll.
I thought the field officer is never dull. There's just so many things to do, but I have to say, if it isn't going to marry out, or it just gives me a little angst. I mean, I want to learn a system, but it just, what is the thing that's going to bite me tomorrow? And that's where I spend my time, on those critical things. So I see the power of it. It looks interesting. I think it'll be useful. I just want to know if it's going to stay, and then I would probably invest more time. And I like the idea that being a one-stop shop and replacing these other systems. But I imagine it's not easy.
That's a great question, and I'll give you my best answer. And I have been in a fields position, so I feel your pain, and I couldn't hear you completely, but I think it boiled down to, what's the payoff in the investment of me learning yet another system that's limited currently in its integration with other systems. It's not required, whereas you have these other required reporting systems. You have WFDS that's required. So what is it buying you, and why is it worth your time, and where is it going? Was that the gist of it?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good question. We are, with the reporting and the monitoring, in the immediate, we are adding that fuels treatment effectiveness monitoring, which is a required reporting. So that will be something that you're required to do, and you'll access it through IFTDSS. As far as integration with WFDS, I think ideally, in the long term, yes, there'll be a relationship between the two of them, but in the short term, no. There are not official ties. We're working on sort of subtle integrations, like we're using the same reference data set. We're working on a back-end platform where it's running the same models. We do have the download capability in IFTDSS for work that you do on your landscape and the outputs of your run, so you can download results that might be easier to generate from here and import them into other systems, but they're not yet currently integrated. And it is, while it is part of the long-term vision, none of that's on the short-term calendar other than FTEM. I will say that the risk work that we're going to be building next, and Nicole is largely involved with that, and that starts in June, will be something that's not really available through any other means to a person at the district or forest level unless they know how to run like FSIM. That's largely been the purview of contractors, like what Joe Scott's done for the Southern Sierras, and we're trying to take that concept of trade-off benefits and risks to values and assets on the landscape and putting some of the knobs and the buttons in the hands of the local unit to be able to calibrate it and play with it locally, not only at the forest level, but also more at, say, a district or a project level. So I don't know if that directly answers your question, other than to say there's some tools in here that I think are going to help you do burn plan implementation and burn prioritization in a way that you haven't had available to you before. But it is a new thing that you'd have to learn.
Okay, no, that answers it enough.
I'm really we should have a person that's really good at marketing on here, but that's my take on it. And I've been in a fields position. The plus side, like I said, is that it's fast and it's really not that hard to use. I've jumped around, but just to zoom out to show you guys this, if you go back to when you come in and you're at the cycle and you go through more of a standard user route, you would just say, give me a landscape summary. This is the first time you've ever come in here. You'd say, tell me what landscape, and you would say, I don't have one yet. You say, I just want to create one here in the Map Studio. So you create it by drawing it. If you create here, like I said, you draw a little box. You just go, whoop, I'm not going to do one that big. Or you create in the Map Studio and you draw your box. And then once you pick it, just pick one. Same thing, you either have an area of interest shapefile or you upload one, and then you say request a report. And you get that Auto 97th report in like 5 minutes. So it's pretty quick, like 3-step process. In the Map Studio, that creating a landscape is pretty simple. You say, I want to create one. You click on the landscape tools. You say, I want to create one, and you just go draw it somewhere. And then you name it. You say what your source is, whether it's Landfire 2014 or 12, whether you want 40 fuel models or 13. Name it, put it in a folder, and create it. And then you get these products pretty quickly. Similarly, we already showed you how you can run those fire behavior models, and they're all just stored in that workspace, and you don't have to get too fancy with managing a bunch of files. You just go find it, and you click on it and say view on map, and it'll bring you there. As far as the file upload, some of you might be interested, so I should just show you when you upload a shapefile. Currently you upload them, it needs to be a zip file, but it can only contain one multi-part polygon at a time. When you say upload, maybe I'll just grab the Pine Grove files or something. When you bring it in, you can bring in a certain number of attributes, limited up to 10 with it. In this case, what I got only had 3. You say save and add to map, tell it where you want it to go. Just put in my workspace for now. And you can bring that in. And once again, it'll automatically bring you to that file. This is the part where it's just a fuels person GIS. So let's say I brought in all these treatment units, but we're going to do different treatments on them, and I need to do the editing. The GIS person could work with me, or I could do it myself. So you open up the table of what came in, and I know whether it's natural or a plantation, and I can make sub-files of these that say I want to sort by this. I just want to take all the natural units and do one treatment. So I can create a new shapefile and say I'm going to create a shapefile of just the natural units, or I'm going to create a shapefile of just the plantations, and do different treatment scenarios on them. So it's sort of a layman's GIS. And with that, I think I should show you guys some of the alternatives analysis, because I think that's the part that can be really cumbersome in the real world, and we've tried to make it quite a bit easier, putting on the fuels person hat and IFTDSS. So you guys want to take a look at some of that stuff?
Absolutely.
That's the stuff I think the power of this is to be able to compare the treatments on a map and show it graphically. I think that's what's cool about this program that I found, Carolyn, is when I was doing this project, Pine Grove and Sunny Meadows, to show the fire behavior before the treatment and after the treatment and show it graphically in a real fast process. And I think that's the cool part of this whole process, how this works, showing that.
Yeah.
For NEPA anyways.
Yeah, that's the intent. Is it is pretty quick, and it allows you to test different things and not, like I said, be hung up waiting to get a product. You can actually be thinking about trying different things because you can do it pretty quickly and go, oh, that doesn't look right at all. So the way you do that, what I've shown you so far is the landscape summary, where you get that quick Auto 97 and then the landscape fire behavior. Landscape editing, there's two reasons you might do it. One is, you're starting with land fire data. You can choose the version. Presumably, you probably choose the most recent, which is still only Landfire 2014. So you might want to edit it first to reflect changes since 2014. The other reason you'll edit it is to game out different treatment scenarios. To say, what if we did this treatment, what would happen? So you can either do the editing from here, or we do have a specific developed treatment alternatives workflow built up that's under strategic planning, and the primary difference between them is that comparison functionality. So I'm going to show you within this developed treatment alternatives how you would do it so that you can see those comparisons. So I've already done some playing around with this just to show you. You go under strategic planning, you select developed treatment alternatives, and this is one place where it is kind of linear. You've got 5 tabs across the top, and you will proceed in a fairly methodical order across them. So you'd start with your, your beginning landscape that you've drawn and done nothing with, just your Landfire 2014. If you have an area of interest that you want to look at, you select that now. So that's something that exists currently within the extent of this landscape as a shapefile, and it'll list your choices. In this case, it depends what we want to do. Let's say, for example, what I did in playing around with this is I decided that there was some edits that needed to be made first to the Landfire data, that it wasn't perfectly representing the landscape. And I'm going to switch gears for a minute and show you my thought process as I went through this with some information that Bert gave me. I tried to organize it. I was just working on this when you guys joined us. So these are sort of the steps in my thought process of developing alternatives. So just bear with me for a minute, but we start with a fields layer of Landfire 2014 data. And just for fun, I was going to say, based on Bert's input, that there's some mortality issues going on out there that aren't reflected on the landscape. So we could spend a lot of time talking about what the best edits are to better represent that mortality. And we can do that if you want, but one thing I wanted to just point out is the process. So you start with Landfire 2014, and then you would make edits to get it to what you consider to be the existing condition. So in this case, just not thinking too hard about it, I drew a polygon and set all the canopy, if you can read this, canopy characteristics to 0. So it just said there's no canopy cover, there's no canopy bulk density, and there's no crown base height for these. That would all be 0. So that is going to change the fire behavior on the landscape. It's not necessarily going to, well, it isn't going to change the surface field model characterization, but it will change the way that the model models the fire behavior through there, as it takes into account sort of increased sunlight exposure, a little bit more wind, that type of thing. So that would be the first step, is to make an existing condition, and a similar thing could be if there's been a wildfire, if there's been a mudslide, whatever it might be that you needed to update, you would do that first, and you get your existing condition landscape. And I'll show you the way you do the actual edits in the application. And then Bert gave some examples of different treatments. So I did one example of an alternative just for fun, doing a commercial thin on all the units she gave me. And you can break it out by specific treatment unit. I just lumped them all for demo purposes. And then I'll show you within the application the edit rules that we were applied and how easy it is to apply them. And then I did one that was commercial thinning of all units. I did one that was just prescribed fire, so no harvesting. And then I did one that was a more complex multi-stage treatment suite that Bert had described. So it was, I believe it was the thinning, burning, and then coming in and doing some more. So it was thinning, burning, coming in, thinning, piling, and burning, coming in again and doing some more mastication, and then following that up again with fire. So I've got these 4 alternatives. And what you do is you create a landscape to represent each one of these, and then you do comparisons of the fire behavior across these. So for the resource people, the comparison is going to be primarily in terms of fire behavior model output, so flame length, rate of spread, that sort of thing. There will be some landscape comparison that you can do of the canopy characteristics and surface fuel model, but it's not vegetation per se. So if there's no questions on that, I'll show you how you actually go through that process in the application.
While you're switching over, I'm just going to chime in. If you are interested in how the vegetation type changes, if you use these rule sets that Caroline's going to show, you can download the landscape file, and with that, there's extra information about the existing vegetation type, cover and height, and you can link that back to metadata from Landfire to know what the transition was between vegetation types due to your treatments. But you can't view that within the application. You have to go to a GIS to do that.
Okay, so Nicole, on the Landfire, you guys have Landfire from 2014. Do you know when the next update's going to come through for California?
They are working on the remap right now, and the remap is data circa 20, I want to say 15, but their release, and Caroline Henry told us about this, I think it's not till like 2020.
Yeah,
so
it's a long way out.
Yeah, it's not coming anytime soon, unfortunately.
Okay.
So until that update comes, we're left on our own as far as figuring out what from either satellite imagery or ground truthing as to what it actually looks out there, and then going into the program and then making those changes. And I think you just did that by changing either canopy base height or canopy bulk density and those sort of things. So is that what you just did?
Yeah, I think Caroline's going to show a little more detail on that.
Yeah, and we can talk more about that if this is a significant issue for you guys in terms of just getting your landscape, your base landscape layer to what you believe to be a good representative existing condition. But the mechanism is still the same, and it's within this edit landscape functionality, which is, it's got some things in it that are not available in any other applications. So let me just start walking you through that, and I think you'll see what I'm getting at. So in this case, like I said, we're in this develop treatment alternatives. We picked our starting landscape, the Sunny Meadows area. And again, this is very interactive, so I could view a summary of what that is or view it on the map. That's what these little icons are right here. I won't. And then an area of interest if you choose. In this case, I took the proposed treatment units for north and south merged as an area of interest. But the next important step is this landscape editing. So that's what I was getting at in that table that I was showing you guys. So the first step is if you want to create an existing condition, you would start with your Sunny Meadows landscape. And now within IFTDSS, there's a couple different ways you can edit your landscape, but the new one and the one that's not available anywhere in any other application is it actually uses the same rules that Landfire uses to update their landscapes between versions, but it's all built into a series of lookup tables. So you can just do a selection of different either things that have already occurred that you're going to do to correct or proposed treatments that you want to try and simulate, and it will automatically do those edits for you. So when I just showed like the canopy edits and stuff, this is a series, this first set of rules is a series of lookup tables that does all those changes for you based on what type of disturbance you choose. So there's 4 different kinds of treatments. There's thinning and removing slash, there's thinning and slash remains, there's clear cut, and then wildland fire. And wildland fire is really just fire. It can be used to represent prescribed fire as well. And then with each of these disturbance types, if you select one, you get a little bit more choices in terms of the intensity of them. So for thinning and slash remove, you can select between a light thinning and pile burning and a heavy thinning and pile burning. And you'll notice as I hover over it, there is a descriptor that describes the actual, some quantitative values assigned to that. This one says thin stands to 35% of present density by removing material with no upper diameter. Limit subsequent pile burning of thin material. That's for the heavy thinning, and then the light thinning thins to 80% of present density up to 8-inch DBH. So the point I want to make here, and I think I exchanged an email with her about this, is that although there's numbers here and quantifications, it should really, you can get yourself sideways pretty quick trying to take prescriptions that you guys might have in terms of basal area or trees per acre and trying to fit them into these general buckets or categories. It's better to just think of it as a spectrum and then look at the results and calibrate which one makes the most sense based on your experience working in these communities and these field types. So just with each one, with the intensity level, you only have 2 choices. It's light or it's heavy. Similarly with thin slash remains, it's moderate, up and scatter, moderate, thin and masticate, or a heavy, thin and masticate. And there are descriptors there, but again, it's sort of to go from the least to the greatest in terms of intensity level of that treatment. Clear cut is pretty straightforward. It's clear cut and broadcast burn. And then for fire, whether it is to represent a fire that's already occurred and you're correcting your data, or you want to simulate a prescribed fire that's planned, or, what if we allowed a fire to burn in the wilderness, then you have to pick one severity category. So it's really based on the conditions under which the fire burns. You can't adjust severity based on, other things on the landscape. It's going to do that for you. So you just pick in general, is it going to be under low severity conditions, moderate, or high? Then further, once you've selected these disturbance types, you select duration. So do I want my landscape to reflect that there was a low severity wildland fire and what it looks like 1 year after the disturbance, or 2 to 5 years after the disturbance, or 5 to 10 years after? So if you have a fire from 2014 that land fire didn't pick up, you can select whatever the conditions the fire burned under, what the time was, apply it to a shapefile of that fire here, and then create a new landscape, and that will do the update for you. So there's a lot packed into this functionality right here. People tend to want to be able to look at what it's going to do and see the tables, but the thing to remember is that it's done actually at the pixel level, so it's done based on some underlying land fire data of existing vegetation, existing cover, and existing height. So the number of cross-references between the tables is enormous. And it's actually pretty good when you start drilling down. We've spent a fair bit of time looking at what it comes up with, and it's far better than what we would do in the old days. I know I did when I worked in Yosemite. It was just like if there had been a fire, I would draw a polygon. I would say, okay, now that's grass. And I would say that for the entire acreage of a 7,000-acre fire or something. But what these lookup tables will do is look at the fuel model that was there, look at the landscape, and then come up with a guess as to, 1 year later, has it truly turned to grass, or is it, something different? And it'll have a new landscape that's not necessarily homogeneous, one change on the landscape. It's taking into account what was there previously. So I can demonstrate that with some of the reports, but are there any questions in general on this list of potential edits? Hearing none, I'll keep going. Or did I not give enough time? All right, the other type of edits, you can see I can open and close these. So back to this editing thing, if you don't want to do one of these broad scale edits, there are still what I call the traditional user-created edit rules. So if that set of disturbances or fuels treatments doesn't match and you want to just do some manual edits on your own, you can still do that. This is more like a traditional GIS exercise. So this is where, for those areas that had mortality, I just came in and applied a mask. I called it mortality pocket, I think, and I did say for all the canopy attributes, canopy cover set to 0. And then I did it again for canopy base height set to 0. So this is where you could do one of those more manual edits if you had confidence in exactly what you thought things should be changed to. And again, you would add it to rules and save it. So then you just name your edited landscape and you save a new one. So in this manner, I went through and took all the alternatives that Bert gave me, and I want to just bring those back up and show you guys one as an example. So for pre-commercial thinning all the units, for example, the other thing I can show you is you can do this in what's called a split map mode, so I can be looking at a map while I do it. So I've started in, just turn on, this is my little mortality pocket I was just fooling around with, but if I turn that off, but I bring in the units that I know are the proposed treatment units for this area. I think those are them, yeah. So here's the proposed units. I've got...
no, that's a different area. It's not, so that's
is it?
Meadows. No, those are different, whole different area.
Oh, that's Pine Grove, my bad. Hang on. Sunny Meadows.
Yeah, the treatment area.
There we go. Does that look better?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. So, like I said, I lumped together your north and your south. My apologies. It was just a little bit lazy on my part. But let's say I wanted to represent, and this is, I know, probably not realistic, but just for demonstration's sake, I was going to do a commercial thin on every one of these polygons within the unit. So I start with, I started here in this first tab with Sunny Meadows. When I get to the Edit tab, I'm actually going to use my Sunny Meadows again as my first choice. Whoops. Sorry, it's zooming out to the full forest. And then I'm going to conduct my edits. So to represent the pre-commercial thin, was the pre-commercial thin I did first of all the units. Here's my choices, right? I've got this thin/remove, thin/remains, and if I look, Bert described this to me as, if I got this right, hand and machine pre-commercial thinning of trees less than 10 inches, slash is piled and burned, and it's followed up with a prescribed fire 3 to 5 years later, right? So, okay, so the first thing is thinning, and since the slash is piled and burned, I'm going to look under thin/removed. And then I've got the choices of light or heavy, and since it's pre-commercial, I chose to go with light for the first time. And then I interpreted that it might be a while by the time the prescribed fire, the follow-up prescribed fire happens. So I said, I think in this case I said 2 to 5 years. That's what I did for what that would look like at the time. So 2 to 5 years. And then you say add to rules, and up at the top here it pops up a record of what I did. Oops, and I forgot to apply it to a mask. Actually, I need to apply it to just those units, so let me delete that. Again, that was thin/remove light thinning, 2 to 5 years, and I'm going to apply it to the treatment areas and say add the rules. So this listing up here keeps me honest. This is what I've told it to do. Thin from below, light thinning, pile burning. And then he also mentioned it's going to be followed up with a prescribed fire. So I can add a second rule, which is wildland fire is low severity. We want to look at what it would look like immediately after that. Apply it to the same landscape mask and say add to rules. So I've got these 2 rules. It's cumulative. They're going to build on one another. You apply them in order. That's important. And then my resulting landscape should reflect this pre-commercial thinning across all these treatment units. So, and I would just name it. I'll just name this one test. And say, and the next step. So you create a series of landscapes that way through this Edit tab. The next tab is the Input tab, and this is where you specify the fire behavior model conditions that you want to run. And you only get to specify one set of conditions. So in most cases, depending on the objectives of the treatment, one of the objectives is hazardous fuel reduction in the event of a wildfire. So I chose some rather hot conditions. In fact, I think I used the Auto 97 conditions that had already come up for this landscape. And you can look and see what was in here. So yeah, I've got 12 at 225 degrees, pretty low fuel moistures, and then those were saved. And then you run the model. In this case, I've already run a few, and I named them Alternative 1, pre-commercial thinning. That's what I just showed you building that. Alternative 2, I simulated commercial thinning and pile burning, so the same edits that I just showed you to the landscape, except I chose heavy thinning instead of light thinning. And then we'll be able to compare the difference in the modeled environment between those 2. I did a third one where I just applied prescribed fire to all of them, and I did a 4th one where I did that multi-stage entry. I've already run all these. I'm not going to run this one I just created because that was just a test. So you select run and run the models here. You can see these are completed, and I did this in advance so I could just demonstrate to you guys. They don't take super long. The key thing is you go to this compare tab, and now you have the ability to compare these different treatment scenarios either on a map or in a summary report to see the difference. So the way you do that is you pick what you want to compare, and currently we're limited to comparing only 2 things at a time. So for example, if I want to compare the pre-commercial thin to the existing condition, I select those 2, then I say compare in summary report, and I click on that, and I say create report, and it'll say loading. And you compare both in either or, the landscape itself or the fire behavior resulting from it. So you can see what modifications it did to the, the vegetation or fuels in terms of the structure of the canopy on the surface fuel model. And then you'll be able to see the flame length, rate of spread, etc. So you can do that, like I said, in a function of 2 at a time, and then you can get a report to look at. I'm just going to see if I have one that I've already created. Here's one. So I'm going to compare the, in this case, well, it'll tell me what it is. So you get a hyperlink once it's been prepared, and you just click on that hyperlink, and it will open up a report for you. So in this case, the header is kind of cumbersome to help you keep track of what you've done. But in this case, this is fire behavior comparison just in the proposed treatment areas. And I'm comparing a pre-commercial thin which is in blue, to the untreated, in this case, just the raw land fire data, which is in green. So if you pause for a minute and kind of turn your head sideways and think about it, these are flame lengths, 0 to 1, 1 to 4, etc. So before we did any proposed treatments, our fire behavior, the greater than 25-foot flame length, for example, was 25% of the landscape, and we had 19% of the landscape in this 11 to 25-foot range. Post-treatment, we've shifted a lot that green over here to the blue, so the vast majority of the flame lengths are now in the 1 to 4 foot category, 92% of the landscape. So this is the type of output that you probably want to be looking at, and it's here both in terms of the bar chart. You've got the raw numbers again, like the other reports, where you can download and look at it. So you've got both a pixel count and then an acreage, and these headers help you sort through. So the area of interest acres, so the total sum of the treatments is 2,281 acres. So that's what we're looking at, is just that area of interest of those 2,281 acres. And you've got the distribution again. This is just flame length in a variety of different presentation formats, but they can be useful if your goal was to switch from high flame lengths to low flame lengths. This model output shows that type of change. So similarly with spread rate, we've gone from the original green, a lot of representation in the original landscape at the high flame lengths, to low, a lot more blue in the treated landscape, to low flame length classes. So you get the idea of, and you can download each of these charts individually or as an entire report. So you can compare one treatment scenario to the original landscape. You can also compare a couple of treatment scenarios to each other. It is frustrating that you can only compare 2 at a time right now. But for example, if I go into my Sunny Meadows analysis and I just look at, you can filter over here by a variety of things. So I'm going to filter by different reports that I generated for these. So we just looked at alternative 1, pre-commercial thinning versus nothing. I did one where I compared, this one I compared commercial thinning to pre-commercial thinning. So these 2 treatment options against each other. And this one was more interesting. Remember, this is the model, right? So it's not necessarily going to reflect as much difference as you would actually see on the ground. But in terms of model, did I get the area of interest? I'm not sure if I got the area of interest on this one. It's showing very little difference between using the choice of heavy thinning or light thinning on the landscape. But I'm actually not sure. This is the right report. Hang on a second. These are kind of, you have to hover over them to see exactly what you compared. Well, it's as good as any to look at. I think what I did in this one by mistake is I didn't specify the area of interest. So it's just showing across that entire landscape what the change is, which is very little. If I had chosen an area of interest, there'd probably be a very slight difference, which I could do. But it sort of puts it into the context of the bigger landscape, and that's something that I wasn't sure if you guys wanted to do analysis just within the proposed treatment areas or the treatment areas in the context of a larger project area, or both. You can do both. Depends on that, what you choose for that mask, for that area of interest. So I'll pause there and see if you have any questions or comments on what I've showed you there so far.
So Carolyn, the question or the comment I have to make is where this comes into play for us is mainly a NEPA analysis when we're trying to compare alternatives against the no action alternative. Is what is the against, because we use our land management plan that provides our metrics, fire behavior like flame length, heat per unit area, rate of spread as our metrics of a baseline to compare against. So with those parts like that, that's why, when we compare that, that's where those fuels treatments comparisons comes in to show the differences of the treatments and how it affects those three metrics for fire and fuels. So other resources that, have those metrics like canopy cover for wildlife, how does it change the canopy cover after our treatments? I mean, that's, they have the same kind of metrics. Usually since we're in Fisher area down here in the Sierra and the Sequoia, our canopy cover can't drop below 60%. That's kind of our general rule of thumb for canopy cover. So, I could see that being utilized for at least a baseline to compare, okay, what alternative is going to keep the canopy cover, with the treatments above 60% and still provide, the changes there on a positive note, or what goes over that threshold.
Okay, yeah. I pulled up, so you can do a compare fire behavior or compare landscape. And I pulled up canopy cover. This is a comparison of prescribed fire only versus no treatment. So the green is with no treatment and the blue would be post. This is just prescribed fire. So the original landscape has, this is greater than 60 to 70% canopy cover. Looks like it has a 38% distribution of that across this. This is 41,000 acre landscape. And then there's a shift post-treatment. There's a pretty dramatic reduction in that because this is looking, at those thinnings. So this is something that I'm hearing is less desirable to have them below a certain canopy cover level. I would caution that these are models, and the land fire data for canopy cover is already a categorization. You guys may or may not know this, but it's just put into classes. It's based on remote sensing data, and then it's put into canopy cover classes. And then these rules are applying some pretty blanket rules to what the changes in canopy cover would be based on these different treatments. And although it's based on plot data, I don't know how well, honestly, it would represent. We can look at these results on a map, and you guys could evaluate that if you want to look at that. Have you guys looked very hard at the land fire canopy cover data as it exists, just to see how accurate it is compared to your local data?
No, not really.
I would venture to guess it's not reflecting what we just had happen over the last 3-4 years with this massive tree die-off. But is there other means of bringing in data into IFTDSS other than land fire? There is,
no,
right?
That's the base data for all these model runs. The only option you would have would be to edit that canopy information based on some other information to make it more reflective. And I'm not sure. At least I'm scratching my head. Nicole, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, that covers it. I mean, you could, if you know it's totally off, you could do land or edit rules across the whole landscape to update it or make it more accurate.
So the LCP file that is done in WoodFish, so the LCP file that's in WoodFish can be imported in here if it's been updated for the Sierra mortality.
No, at this point we don't upload the landscape files, unfortunately.
Okay.
Well, how did you get that into WoodFish?
Well, no, I think what they're doing, I mean, I believe that LCP file in WoodFish has been updated with our tree mortality, I believe. I mean, I could be wrong, but I believe it's been updated from like Phil Bowden and, you know, our regional planners there in the regional office.
That'd be worth investigating. I don't know how they would have done that, but if they have, we could check into getting that. I mean, I'm saying they may have,
Well, what about the?
but I'm not sure.
What about the risks files that Joe Scott's using for our risk, or because Joe Scott is for the risk analysis that Joe Scott did, he's using an LCP file that has been updated. Like him and Phil, and you know, a couple of years ago, they were going through a lot using that layer to run fire sims across the 3 forests down here because we're updating our land management plan. So I know they have a more up-to-date LCP file to be able to do their simulations for that, for our land management plan revision. So yeah, I know there's something newer than 2014 out there.
Yeah, I have no doubt there are landscape files. Well, go ahead, Nicole.
I was going to say the same thing. Unfortunately, though, we can't upload landscape files at this time into IFTDSS. But yeah, I know Joe did a lot of work to update stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, we would like to have the upload functionality, but if it's been incorporated by Landfire itself, that's why I'm curious about it. Then it's easier for us just to wholesale change out a geographic area with an updated Landfire layer. So I'd be curious to know, but we're usually pretty in sync with this on that stuff. So that's why I was saying we're not fully integrated, but we have the same data managers. So my guess is that any change in one would be reflected in the other. And our project manager is the Landfire project manager. But I would like to check because I'm sure this is very relevant to a lot of people. To make sure.
Well, at least for the southern forest for us, because we've, like I said, from the Stanislaus south, we've had major shifts in canopy cover, fuel type, and then it's going to just get worse over time as those trees start falling down. We're going to have huge fuel loads that, you know, are going to start coming into play for become available. That, you know, we're going to have to start shifting the fuel models. And I don't even know what fuel models we're really looking at to use because I don't even think it's going to capture some of the fuel loading we're going to see in the future. So,
yeah.
Yeah, I think
so I have a couple of thoughts. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I was thinking about when you're talking about surface fuel model and canopy base height and bulk density, and that we have a situation where it's all intermixed and dead last year versus dead 4 years ago, and it's all intermixed. So it seems like we have such a unique, in a lot of ways, fuel model for this area. But it was showing on the map. One part of your presentation, it showed a surface crown fire, or rather than a crown fire, across a large landscape. And I was wondering, I don't remember what we were basing that on. I think it was a 97th, and I had a hard time, seeing how that could be, just knowing how our landscape is looking these days. I think under any, 97th percentile conditions, we just about see at least some sort of crown fire of some sort. Was that you?
Yeah, well, I have a few thoughts. So this is the Auto 97th run, if I'm zoomed into your area pretty well. The park boundary, I think, is here, and then the forest boundary here. So this is 97th percentile conditions, with the green being low flame lengths, and the red being the high. If you're seeing wholesale problems with this, I think with the types of mortality issues and problems that you guys have, it depends on the scale of what analysis you're trying to do. When you're at the stand level and the treatment level, I think you're going to have better local data and local knowledge by far to make those decisions, but putting it into the context of, where are the danger areas and stuff. Usually these landscape level tools are pretty good. I don't know if this one is or not, but if it's not, if you can detect what seems off, I think there might be some relatively simple edits you could do. To capture the mortality would be more complex, but you can do it. One thing I guess to say is I know this looks cumbersome, and the idea of editing like the whole forest sounds hard, but that's because this application is so modern. If you develop an updated Sierra landscape, you only have to do that once, and then everybody doesn't have to do it, and then you're all working off of that landscape. There's not file sharing, but you could share the rules to create those landscapes at this point, and then all these analyses that I did, it's going back to something that's already modeled and just reapplying things. So you wouldn't have to do it every time. You just have to do it once and create a new base layer for the forest, I guess is my point. So it would take effort on someone's part.
So Carolyn, that's kind of what was kind of running through my head when I started with how fast this thing will create a run. Is create, meet with the district field folks or the forest field folks and get us all together and do a run for the Sierra and both come up with what is work up a whole forest-wide layer and to put into our corporate layer, GIS layer for everybody to use. If both districts can agree on, hey, these are the conditions that are representative, we adjust the landscape accordingly, do some kind of practice runs, and then give it to our GIS folks to convert it into shape or a corporate layer to be able to use for the whole forest. So.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, it's better than everyone making it up on their own. And if everybody can take a look and apply, if this looks wrong and there should be a representation of mortality all through one area, you can just make the adjustments. If the important thing is getting the fire behavior right, then you don't have to dwell as much on what those fuel model characteristics you're using. If it's more important to just recognize that it's going to be a high flame length area. It doesn't do as much for the resource people, sure, but it gives you those hot spots or danger zones, better representation on the map.
Okay.
Did you guys have any other questions or comments? I know Nicole and I did look a little bit at. Could somebody closer to the phone say that?
Yeah, you're asking about questions?
Yeah.
Can you identify it right there? It seems like the bulk of our mortality is at that 4,000 to 5,500 elevation, 4,000 to 5,500 elevation range. I mean, that might help, but I'm not sure if you can do that.
You're wondering if the red band is in the 4,500 to 5,500 elevation?
Yeah. I just want to know what the landscape looks like. Sweet, that's it?
Yeah, here, let me just turn off flame length and turn on, wait, let me grab my landscape.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, Carolyn?
Uh-huh.
Hey, Carolyn? Hey, could you, in chance, could you smooth the map, like move the area of interest over towards Shaver, east of Shaver, towards a place called Blue Canyon area? We'll kind of guide you in on the map there so the live air folks can see an area that they're familiar with.
Yeah. Hang on a sec. Let's see. Want to get so we can swipe the finally some rate of spread. Where do you guys want to go?
So Shaver Lake, you know where Shaver Lake is on the map?
Shaver Lake.
Yeah.
I'm guessing.
To the south of.
I think you need to go north from where you're at right now.
Here's the
Yeah,
park.
Huntington Lake right there.
Go south. Go south.
Yeah. So right there where it says Cedar National Forest boundary to the southeast of your map. Keep going southeast.
Here, let me turn off the landscape for a second and just look at
That's Kaiser right there.
so where should I go?
Looking for a lake that's kind of flat and spread out.
The Quartz Mountain, yeah, keep moving southeast. Keep
This
dragging it. Yeah, to the south. No, keep going. Keep to the southeast.
Near the town of Shaver Lake.
Shaver Lake.
Oh, there it is. Okay. I don't know if there's a delay. Okay.
Okay.
You guys seeing it?
It's refreshing a little bit slow on this end. It's kind of slowly going there. Okay. Okay,
Okay.
there's Shaver Lake.
So if you could drag it up just a hair toward, zoom in a little bit, drag it to the south just a hair to see Blue Canyon. Blue Canyon is that big canyon right below Shaver to the south of Shaver Lake.
All right.
Slight south. Southeast.
Right there, yeah.
And that long drainage there that dumps into the Kings River. That's where we've done a lot of prescribed burning there. I guess that's right in that elevation range I was just describing, 4,000 to 5,000 feet.
Okay.
And that area is pretty much dead.
So there's the elevation gradient, if you're seeing it. And then I can turn on flame length and rate of spread. It'll take a minute, I think. And then we can use the swipe tool. To so your reds are in this area.
Is there a way to transparency it a little bit more so you can see the background underneath of it? Because you need some reference put to it, kind of see the map underneath of it a little better. The base map.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, Carolyn?
Uh-huh.
Hey, can we take about 5 minutes, folks, need to use the restroom real quick?
Sure. Absolutely.
5 minutes. Yeah. Get started about 10:45.
So I think I got the screen to display what it was you were interested in, although I'm not positive, which would be this area south of Shaver Lake, the fire behavior, in this case flame lengths, and then the swipe with currently the land fire layer. I could turn that off if you just want to look at the imagery, I guess. Maybe I can't. To see if, I think you guys are trying to see if it's reflecting recent treatments that have been conducted in this area.
Recent massive tree die-off.
Say again? Oh, recent die-off?
Die-off, yeah. About 75% or so of that canyon, I mean, there's some natural barriers in there, rock and such, but a lot of it's pretty much dead, you know.
It doesn't look like it's capturing anything wholesale. This looks more gradient driven on the topography here, what's currently displayed, doesn't it?
This is 2014.
So could you put the imagery, kind of slide it with the imagery, Carolyn?
Yeah, I was trying to figure out how to do that. I am obviously not the world's greatest swiper. Let's see. If I turn that off, turn that off. Well, there we go. So if I zoom in, when you guys refer to the canyon, do you mean the one over here to the east? This one? Or?
No, where you're at, right in the middle of the screen.
This one? All right.
That canyon runs from northwest and it drains southeast.
Okay.
Oh yeah, look at that. That's all that red, that's dead. But
yeah,
that was in 14. Yeah, we've done some treatments, but you know, a lot of them are just along roads, and roads you've seen there, 200 feet each side.
Yeah, I'm just guessing, looking at swiping this, that it's not capturing that because this red is probably just the, you know, even where there's darker green, where it's just a heavy canopy that's going to have a crown fire, even when it's healthy, it doesn't seem to be lighting up under the what appear to be mortality areas. So, yeah.
So that's where you have to go and change it.
Is there a fuels planner for the forest that handles, you know, the land fire data? Like Phil, I guess, did, and Jan, I don't know who would handle that now. Or is it at the regional level?
You did it for the region. Regional level. So we're just, you know, that was some of my questions when I first got into this program. When I emailed it with the help desk about how are we going to tweak the characteristics. What characteristics do we tweak to kind of capture the heavy mortality we've had on the Sierra? So that's kind of what that question was, because, you know, we're going to have to do that at the forest level to be able to change that whole landscape to capture the mortality that we just had. And you're seeing a sample of it that's, you know, pretty old now, but, you know, everything that's green is now dead on that picture.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, I was just seeing, we're looking, here's the canopy cover, so it should be 0, right? If it's current, then it's not 0. So, yeah. Yeah, it looks, I mean, I think the first step would be to find out if somebody has worked with Landfire to get more recent data sets built, and if they haven't, then it would see who has the time and interest to work on that at a broad geographic scale. I'm guessing that, like, who's your geographic area editor for WFDS in that area, do you know?
Yeah, I don't know right now. I'm not sure anymore.
There's been some people that retired, so I'd have to investigate that.
Yeah, I would say that if you can figure out who those people are, you know, we can talk to them and try and learn if there are ongoing efforts or make some recommendations for efforts that could go on. That, like we were saying, if you can edit within IFTDSS, you can do edits up to 3.5 million acre landscapes, fairly quickly. So the hard part would be deciding what edits to put and calibrating to make sure that they're working versus actually creating the new landscape. That would be relatively easy.
Yeah. Okay.
I was gonna say, I know there's been efforts, not just California, but there's been mortality outbreaks in Oregon and places over the years that people have developed different rules. So aside from the canopy characteristics, there may be some other ideas people have out there about changing surface model or whatever. I haven't done a lot of that myself.
Okay.
Did you guys have any other questions? I can pull up just to go back to the agenda we had, and then my example would be different treatment edits and the way you could compare treatments at a finer scale. I still am not sure if you guys are, it sounds like you're both interested in the NEPA analysis at the project level as well as this larger scale analysis to incorporate a lot of the new risks associated with mortality. So if you guys have specific things you want to look at in regard to that, or any other questions? You guys still there? Got quiet. There you are.
Okay. Can you hear us?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's weird.
Yeah, I was just wondering if there was a report that comes out of your fire, whatever prescribed fire, that you could, what we could put in the burn plan. I mean, because right now we're just putting the behavior runs in there to show our empirical documentation of fire modeling, what actually gets printed out.
If I heard you right, it was what could you actually use in a burn plan from IFTDSS?
Yes. What gets printed out to put in the burn plan?
Yeah. One of the people I work with has been working on that. She's been helping teach the Burn Boss class. So it has to do with that fire behavior. Now in a burn plan you use behave. And really what we have here with the model that's in here is sort of behave on a map. So it would be taking either that low-end or high-end prescription, whichever one you chose, and grabbing a screen capture of the map of that both within the proposed burn unit and then, additionally outside of the unit boundary. Like, I can go back to those if we okay with leaving the screen now that I so carefully arranged my swiping tool. To go back to some of those low-end, high-end kind of things. If you want to look at those.
Yeah, we can look at
Hearing
those.
go.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. Trying to remember what I did. I always just go back to this workspace. It's easy for me to find. So here I did cool end and hot end prescription. So let's say cool end prescription view on map. And if I don't remember where the treatment units are, but if I bring back up those proposed treatment units, and then for the burn plan, I don't know what scale, if you write like an individual treatment plan for each one of these polygons, or if there's one burn plan for the project area, but it could show a map where this is the expected fire behavior, the associated flame lengths, it's usually part of the prescription within the burn unit. And then, control problems are primarily to the west. If we get a spot outside to the west, the potential for escape is higher, that kind of thing. And we don't have any canned products at this time, so it would be either a screen capture of one of these maps, or you can do one of those reports and choose your area of interest as just the area of interest being the treatment unit, and you'll get one of those bar graphs of the flame length and vegetation information within that polygon file. And I think, Josh, are you still on? I don't know if Josh is still on. She actually wrote a tutorial. If I go to the help content real quick for resources and tutorials. I think there's something here on...
Sorry, I had to take myself off of mute.
Oh, didn't Kim write something about for the creating a burn plan and a tutorial for what to put in the burn plan? Do you remember?
Specifically, I don't know if there's one that touches on the burn plan aspect. There's a recent one that we're writing in on capturing fire behavior just for an area of interest.
Yeah, that might have been it. Is that on here yet?
Not yet.
Okay.
That is in the line of files to be posted, but it's not on there yet. It probably will be by next week, though.
Okay. Yeah, if you guys, one of you can remember to write back to us about that, I think we do have a tutorial that can walk through the process, but the gist of it is looking at your prescription parameters, running a model, and then going to the map and overlaying it with your proposed treatment area, and then you can create those charts for within the proposed treatment area. So it's just taking your behave. You usually have low, high, and optimal conditions, and running the different fire behaviors and then comparing them or putting them on a map to see them is the recommended so far for burn implementation. Like we said earlier, that's a lot of the cycle that we have yet to more fully develop in terms of implementation planning, where we have some visions for a canned maps with templates for burn plans, but those have not yet been built.
And one tutorial that might be handy in the meantime for this would be the Develop Treatment Alternatives tutorial. It's the, so under Detailed Tutorials, yep, that's the one that we used in the workshop.
Oh, right, okay.
That's a really good one.
So if you guys saw that I went to, if I did it again, I would go to Help Center, and then there's a Resources and Tutorials section. And if you click on that, there's a variety pack, but the Develop Treatment Alternatives. And these are downloadable as PDFs. You can just print them out. But I know Kim helps teach Burn Buff, and actually Jennifer Anderson just used one of her lessons there in California, so I can also check with Jen and Kim and see if we have that lesson plan and get that to you guys. We're still working on a lot of this type of training material while we develop. We're trying to create more and more stuff.
Hey, Carolyn, can you go back to your map?
Sure.
So here's when I wrote into the help desk, and I believe it was between you and I, conversations about you see how the polygons are shaded orange?
Yeah.
The tree polygons, and basically we're trying to look at the fire behavior color underneath of those, and you really can't. That's basically what I was getting at, is if you can get rid of the color of that polygon and just leave the outline of the polygon, that means more to show what's behind that. So
yeah,
all
I
I care
agree.
about is seeing a black line.
Yeah, I am with you.
So that's kind of what I was trying to explain to you in an email. That's a good
Yeah,
example of it right there.
it is. We agree. And I believe we have that on our list of development because it is both that and when you see me with the swiping tool, I have to laugh. I don't find it particularly intuitive. I have to kind of hack around, and this is the same way. It's not as useful as it might be. You're right. Just an outline would make it a lot easier. Good suggestion. So yeah, yeah.
Yeah, this distorts the color ramp as well.
Yep. Yeah, we have a lot of thoughts about ways you could edit the or manipulate these shapes. You can't change the color now either. You know, you get what you get with these colors, and the only way you can change it if you actually re-uploaded it and get another random color and see if you like it better. Right now, we want to allow users to edit that too.
So when you bring it into ARC, is it a raster?
It's a raster. Hey, so Carolyn, here's a question that we're, exporting the fire behavior layer out of here to use in ARC.
Okay.
Could you kind of?
I'll do my best. I think Nicole hung up. She's the expert. But yeah.
Okay.
Have you guys tried it yet? You
Yeah.
You get a multi-part geotiff with, I don't remember the number of bands, and each of the bands is labeled as to the individual attribute components, and it is raster. I'm not a GIS person, so if you have specific questions, I can try.
I'm still here if you need me to. I'm just
Oh,
multitasking
thank God,
now.
yes. Can you talk to this person about GIS?
Yeah, it's downloaded as a it's a multi-band geotiff, so it's a single file when you download it, and then there's actually 18 bands associated. So in addition to what you can see within IFTDSS, there's the dead soil moistures, the wind vectors, since we have Wind Ninja turned on, so mid-plane wind speed as well as the 20-foot wind speed and direction. And a few other things I'm blanking on right now. But there is a little tutorial and help within the help system on how to deal with the multi-band geotiffs within the help system that Josh put together. So you kind of have to add the individual parts instead of the whole geotiff, otherwise you get some psychedelic rendering. Looks like Caroline's looking for it. There you go. The bottom one would be a good one.
Oh.
It might be at the bottom of the screen too.
I think there's a delay.
Yeah,
I'm in, yeah.
Yeah, you're there now. So this will show you how to actually deal with the geotiff bands, and then there's also information elsewhere about the units. So the data, instead of being classified like you see in the maps by flame length classes, it's actually the raw data. So it's the continuous 0 to whatever your flame length is. So every pixel has a different value, and it is for the most part metric. That's the model runs.
So it has to be reclassified then, correct?
Yeah, if you wanted to match the IFTDSS things, you'd have to reclassify it. So you can either just do it for display purposes or actually go through and reclassify. And there are short little step-by-step tutorials on that too within the help.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've got it. There's a little, it's not too hard, but you're dealing with a raster, your raster file.
Yeah.
That would be if you want to do that, yeah.
Thank you, Nicole. So we can't stand too much longer. We have a call coming up, but we have a few more minutes for other questions or discussion. I would say the feedback like you're given for those files and the way you put them into our forum and help desk is really helpful. So keep that stuff coming, and then I will follow up at least on the burn plan implementation stuff. And if you guys can help me find a contact for the mortality, we can follow up together on that as well for ideas about landscape editing.
Okay. Any more questions? Anybody got any questions? I think as we kind of get into it and start messing around with it, Carolyn, we'll probably, you'll probably get a myriad of questions. This is kind of a introductory. Here's a new program, and here's the power of it. Now we got to start kind of really getting there and start messing with it. So I think that'll generate a lot of questions once you start playing around in there at the forest level. Everybody on the forest using it.
Yeah, I would encourage people that you can't break it. It's online, so you don't have to download anything. You just got to create an account, and you can go play. And it's pretty fun to kind of find your house and look at the flames. I would encourage people to take a look, and you'll get a pretty good feel pretty quickly for what it can currently do, and give us ideas for next development steps.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for your time, and thank you to the rest of the team there to help us out. That's a pretty good idea of where we're going here. We're just going to have to get in there and start messing with it now.
Yeah, and we'll probably edit the recording to get rid of the break and some other stuff, but if you guys still want it, in case there's somebody that's interested, we will send it to you guys.
Okay.
All right. Well, thanks very much, you guys. All right.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.